Thank you. Thank you for the introduction and also for this invitation to give some lectures in this summer school. So my topic will be very different from the two first talks. So I will talk about numerical methods and especially finite volume methods, and I will focus on dissipative problems. But let me introduce the topic. So I will not speak about modeling, but assume that you have some model described by a PDE system. And for this model, you want to build a numerical scheme in order to make some simulations. And then, if you want to justify the choice of the scheme, you would like to prove the convergence of the solution to the scheme towards the solution to the PDE system. So if you want to do that, you have to work with this numerical scheme. But in order to do that, you may know some results for the PDE system. So I will not do analysis of PDEs, but I will work with some results coming from analysis of PDEs. So for the analysis of the PDE system, you may know some answers to some questions. So, do you have existence of a solution? Is this solution unique? And do you have some structural properties? And what I mean by structural properties, it means, for instance, positivity of the solution. If the solution is a density, for instance, or a concentration, do you have some entropies or energy and dissipation of this quantity a long time? Do you know some bounds? Do you know some asymptotic behaviors? So all these questions are related to the continuous system of equations. But in practice, if you want to do some analysis of the numerical scheme, you also have to answer to these questions from the numerical point of view. So if you build a numerical method for a nonlinear system, for instance, you want to ensure existence of a solution to the scheme. Maybe say that you have some uniqueness property. And structural properties are also very, very important because if at the continuous level you know that the quantity is a density, it is positive or non-negative, so you want that the scheme has the same property. And it is also the case for if you know that some entropy or some energy is dissipated a long time, if you know some bounds, you want that the scheme satisfies the same properties, and knowing that the scheme satisfies this property, it will help you for the analysis of the scheme, so for numerical analysis. Okay, so first, so today I want to introduce the finite volume method. So the basic principle for finite volume scheme. Maybe some of you already know them, but I want to take some time to introduce them because if some of you don't know, it's also important for what follows. And during the second lecture, I want to introduce what are dissipative problems, what I mean with dissipativity, and how we can get some results for long-time behavior of some equations, knowing this structural property. So today, today it's finite volume schemes. Tomorrow, dissipative problems, and I will focus on continuous equations. And for the last lecture, I want to show you how we can adapt some results from the continuous level to the discrete level. So I will talk about finite volume schemes and long-time behavior. Okay, so I start with this introduction to the finite volume method. So I will introduce the method, so the basic principles and some examples. And in the second part, I want to fulfill the analysis of the finite volume scheme for the Poisson equation. Okay, you may think Poisson equation, it's very basic, but okay, on this basic equation, it's easy to introduce what is crucial for the analysis of finite volume schemes. Okay, so first I give you this book as a reference, so the book by Robert Aymar, Thierry Galouette, and Raphaël Herbin, which is entitled The Finite Volume Method, and what I will introduce, so you can find it in this book, and of course more than what I will present. So finite volume schemes are made for the discretization in space of conservation laws. It means that you have a conservation law, for instance, of this form. You have, it is written, the divergence of a current is equal to a given function. We can adapt them for evolutive equations, so equations of the form dtu plus divergence of J is equal to G, but in practice, in this case, we write a finite difference method for the time discretization. It means a forward or backward Euler scheme if we want to start with a basic scheme in time. Okay, so now what is J? J may be a diffusion flux. And diffusion flux, it means that J is minus gradient of U, or minus gradient of a nonlinear function of U, or it can be also given by minus an anisotropic tensor K times the gradient of U. Okay, so with this first example, you will recover the Poisson equation. You may also consider some convection fluxes. So assume that V is a given velocity field, and then the flux, J, is V times U. So this quantity, U, is convected by the velocity field V. Maybe it's not U, it could be a nonlinear function of U, f of U, and the flux is V times f of U. Or more general form, a given function f of U. Okay, so I will consider this type of fluxes, and of course you can make every combination of diffusion and convection fluxes. Okay, so if you want to write a scheme for a given equation, on a given domain, let's assume here that it is a square domain, you need a mesh, and as I want to write the scheme, I have to introduce some notations for the mesh. So the mesh is made of control volumes, K, and the control volume is, so in 2D it is a polygonal domain, so it is open, convex, and polygonal. And capital T is the set of the control volumes, K. And it recovers the domain omega. I will denote by H the size of the mesh. And I will also introduce, and for finite volume schemes it is very crucial, the set of the edges. So each edge of the mesh is denoted by sigma, and capital E is the set of all the edges of the mesh. And I will also introduce one point by control volume, xk is a point in the control volume K, and P is the set of these points. Okay, so here you have a given control volume, K. You have here a neighbor, which may be denoted by L, and sigma, the edge between K and L, may be also denoted K pipe L, because it is the control volume between K and L. You have xk and xl, and nk sigma is the normal to sigma outward k. Okay, if you have some question, I know it's, so you can ask.
What do you call diameter?
The diameter of the control volume? Yeah. It is it's the maximal distance between 2 points in the control volume. Okay, so what will be, when we work with finite volume methods, first we don't want to build high order scheme because first what we will define one unknown per control volume in order to reconstruct a piecewise constant approximate solution. Okay, so you have one unknown per control volume, and here, so UK is a given, so it's an unknown for the control volume K, and UT is the reconstruction of the approximate solution, so which is equal to UK on the cell K. So you see that the space of approximate solutions is a space of piecewise constant approximate function. Okay. I missed? No. So how can we write the finite volume scheme? In practice, we integrate the equation over each control volume, K. So we start with this basic equation, divergence of J is equal to G. If you integrate it over the cell K, and you use a green formula, you write that the integral of the divergence of J over the cell K, it is the sum over all the edges of K, so EK, of the integral, so of the flux of J through sigma. So this is an exact computation, if you can do it. But now, in order to write the scheme, we have to define some approximation of this quantity, the flux through the edge. So we write the scheme, so we copy what is this equality, but now replacing the exact flux by some numerical flux, and I will denote it Fk sigma. So it means it is a flux through sigma outward K. And for the right-hand side, I take some approximation of this quantity. So it is the measure of K times Gk. And in practice, if I choose for Gk the mean value over K of G, it's not an approximation, but you can choose an approximation also. Okay, so it means that now I have to define this quantity, Fk sigma, which is a numerical flux, and it must be a good approximation of the exact flux. So what does it mean, a good approximation? Now I want that it will be good at the end, but I have to choose it. So this flux, this numerical flux, has to verify these two elementary properties, so conservativity and consistency. What means conservativity? It means that the flux through sigma outward K plus the flux through sigma outward L must be 0. What is going outward K is entering L. Okay. So this is the conservativity of the fluxes. Now we also want that the numerical fluxes are consistent with the exact fluxes. What does it mean? if you know the notion of consistency for finite difference method, it's exactly the same definition. So you take this an evaluation of the numerical flux, but for an exact and smooth solution of the problem, for an exact function, smooth function, and you want to compare it to the exact flux. In practice, with the definition I propose, so these fluxes are integrated over the edges. So I have here to divide by the measure of sigma, but the difference between the numerical flux evaluated on a smooth function and the exact flux must be a big O of h, the size of the mesh. Okay? It is a definition of the consistency. Okay. So I show you some example. So for instance, if I consider the diffusion flux, J is equal to minus gradient of U. Okay, so when I integrate, so the numerical flux, Fk sigma, must be an approximation of the minus the integral over sigma of gradient U dot the normal, Nk sigma. If I have a given value Uk on K and a given value UL on L, and sigma is the age between K and L, it's quite natural to propose as an approximation of the gradient of U dot the normal, the value UL minus UK divided by the distance between XK and XL. And as it is integrated over sigma, it is multiplied by the measure of sigma. Okay, so this quantity, the distance between the centers, XK and XL, is denoted by d sigma. So I propose for the numerical flux Fk sigma minus the measure of sigma divided by d sigma times UL minus UK. It clearly satisfies the conservativity assumption, because if you exchange L and K and you make the sum between Fk sigma and Fl sigma, you will get 0. Now, if you want to check if this numerical flux is consistent with the exact flux, so you have to take here this flux evaluated on an exact, on a smooth solution, so U at XL minus U at XK, and to compare it with the exact flux. And in practice, you will see that it works if XL, so if the line between XK and XL is collinear to the normal. So it means that you have chosen points in each control volume, so the family of points is such that each line XK-XL is orthogonal to the given H sigma. It is a strong assumption on the mesh. Okay, maybe I will come back to this assumption. It means, so if you assume that you have a triangular mesh, how will you choose XK? You will choose the center, the circumcenter of the triangle, and this circumcenter of the triangle must be inside the triangle. That's what means this assumption. And in practice, it works only if you have regular triangles. Okay, let's consider now a convection flux. So if J is V times U, you want to approximate the integral over sigma of V dot the normal times U. So if V is given, you can define some Vk sigma which is the mean value of v dot the normal over the H sigma. And then, if you have an approximation for this quantity, you just have to choose a value for u on the H sigma. And if you want to write a centered flux, you will choose uk plus ul divided by 2. But if you have already heard that centered fluxes are not always good, so you will choose an upwind flux. So depending on the size, on the sign of Vk sigma, you will choose uk or ul. So here you have two different numerical fluxes, and in practice, these two fluxes are conservative because it's due to the definition of Vk sigma, and as you have this relation, you have the conservativity property for both numerical schemes, and you still have consistency. You also have consistency. And in this case, so for convection fluxes, you have consistency without any assumption on the mesh. Okay? The assumption of the mesh I showed you, it's only when you have some diffusion fluxes. But as you may know, we may have some instability problems with the centered scheme, and essentially for pure convection equations. And in practice, in the case of transport equation, or when you have convection fluxes, you may have an additional hypothesis on the fluxes, which is a monotony hypothesis. So this flux, when you define a flux for a numerical flux for a transport equation or for a convection equation, the flux may be increasing with respect to the first variable and decreasing with respect to the second one. But I will not insist on this hypothesis now. Okay? So I will try, so in half an hour, to explain how to do the numerical analysis of the finite volume scheme for the Poisson equation. And I want to insist on some points which will be crucial for all the lectures, and therefore I come back to the continuous problem. So I consider just the Poisson equation with homogeneous Dirichlet boundary conditions on all the boundary. So I consider here that omega is a regular bounded open subset of Rd, and f is an L2 function. So you know that for this problem, there exists a unique solution, U, in H1 naught, which satisfies this variational formulation. So for all v in H1 naught, the integral of gradient of u dot gradient of v is the integral of f times v. And in order to prove the existence of and the uniqueness of a solution to the variational formulation, you may have learned that we can apply Lax-Milgram lemma. Okay, I want to come back to the application of the Lax-Milgram lemma. So you have, for this variational formulation, you have a bilinear form, and for this bilinear form, you want to prove that it is coercive. And coercivity is given thanks to the Poincaré inequality. Okay, the Poincaré inequality says that there exists a constant such that for all u in H1 naught, the L2 norm of u is bounded by this constant times the L2 norm of the gradient of u, and it permits to say that the L2 norm of the gradient, which is a semi-norm on H1, is a norm on H1 naught. And this Poincaré inequality is crucial to prove the coercivity of the bilinear form in the variational formulation. Okay. Now, additional properties. So, if you have this formulation, you can choose a specific test function v. If you choose v is equal to the negative part of u in the weak formulation, you can establish that if f is non-negative almost everywhere, then u is also non-negative. So it gives an information on the solution. And if you take v is equal to u in the weak formulation, you get an energy estimate, which says, because here this is, so the L2 norm of the gradient is seen as an energy, and it is bounded by the constant here from the Poincaré equation times the L2 norm of f to the square. Okay, so you have these structural properties, as I call them, and in practice, I want to show that the numerical method I will write will have the same kind of property. Okay, but first, I want to insist on why we have so many differences between finite element scheme and finite volume scheme. So I just focus on conformal, what is a conformal finite element scheme. So when you have the variational formulation and you want to write a conformal finite element method, you will choose a set of spaces Vn included in H1 knot, and which are so it must be a set of finite dimensional subspaces. Okay? And in practice, when n tends to infinity, you want to tend to H1 knot. Then the scheme is written just by copying the variational formulation. You are looking for un in Vn, and such that for all small vn in capital Vn, you have this equality. Okay, the fact is that the set of approximate function Vn is included in H1 knot. So you can apply Poincaré inequality, and you can also test here if you have, so you, for the proof of existence of the solution to the scheme, it's exactly as for the continuous problem, and you can choose Vn, so small vn equal to un, and as for the continuous level, you will have the same kind of relation. So you will get a bound of the H1 norm of u. Okay? Sorry. And now, okay, if you have a bound on a sequence of approximate solution in H1, you can use the compact embedding of H1 into L2 and then extract a subsequence which converges in L2. And then you have to check that the limit is a solution to the problem. So you see here 2 points. So Poincaré inequality and compact embedding, which can be used for the analysis of the finite element scheme, cannot be used for analysis of finite volume scheme because the set of approximate solution, which is made of piecewise constant function, is not included in H1. Okay, so it's not possible to use directly what is true at the continuous level. It means you will have to prove some discrete counterpart of Poincare inequality and that the compactness arguments must be adapted. Okay? So I will insist lots of time on this fact, but okay, if you have understood that, the set of approximate solution is not included in H1. It's crucial for the analysis. Okay. However, we can try to analyze the scheme. So I just rewrite here what has been written a few slides ago. So the numerical flux is an approximation of the exact flux, and here I give the full definition. It means before I just gave the definition for an interior edge, but using the fact that we have Dirichlet boundary condition, homogeneous Dirichlet boundary condition, we can also give the definition of the numerical flux for an edge belonging to the boundary. So just you replace UL by 0. It is the value prescribed at the boundary. And d sigma in this case, it is the distance from xk just to the boundary. Okay, but you see you have the same kind of definition for an interior edge or for an exterior edge. So here you have the scheme. You have as many equations and unknowns. So you have one equation per control volume and one unknown per control volume. And it is a linear system of equations. Okay, I introduce this notation. Tau sigma is a measure of sigma divided by d sigma. You have one value per edge. It is called the transmissibility coefficient. And I will also use this compact notation. So UK sigma, it means UL if sigma is an interior edge between K and L, and it is 0 if you are at the boundary. Okay, so this is a linear system of equation. You can write it under a matricial form. Okay, we was a set of unknowns, so I should have written here a small u, UK. You have a right-hand side, and the matrix, it's easy to write it. So the diagonal term, AKK, is the sum of the tau sigma for the edge of the cell K. And now the extra diagonal terms are non-zero just if K and L are neighbors, and it is equal to minus tau sigma. It is just written here. Okay. So some properties of the matrix. Maybe I will not write the detail of the computations, but the first thing is that the matrix is a positive definite symmetric matrix, and it is obtained just by calculating U transpose times A times U. It means multiplying the scheme, okay, the line K of the scheme, you multiply it by UK and you sum over the edges. And then just writing, so what I am doing here, it's like at the continuous level, multiplying minus Laplacian of U by U and integrating over the domain. And the integral of U times the Laplacian minus the Laplacian, it's the integral of the gradient of U to the square. So it means that when I do that, at the discrete level, I find something which will be the approximation of the H1 semi-norm, so the approximation of the integral of the gradient of U to the square. And you see, you have a sum of squares. So as you have a sum of squares, it is non-negative, and it vanishes if all the terms all the terms vanish, and then it means if U is equal to 0. So the matrix is a positive definite symmetric matrix, and then you have existence and uniqueness of a solution to the scheme. If we want to check the non-negativity property of the solution, okay, we have seen that at the continuous level, when the right-hand side is non-negative, then the solution is non-negative. So it means, in practice, proving that the matrix A is a monotone matrix. You have different ways to prove this result, but one way is to follow what has been done at the continuous level, so multiplying by the negative part of U the equation and integrating. If you do that, so I apologize here, I don't define take the good definition of the negative part, so the negative part here is negative, because it is a mean between S and 0, but if you follow this computation, so multiplying by the negative part of UK the equation and then doing a discrete integration by parts. If you have some questions of that, we can see after. I don't want to enter now in the details. So you get a sum, still a sum of positive terms, because this function is an increasing function, so this term is positive and this term is a square. So you see that this quantity is always non-negative, but if B is non-negative and you multiply by something which is non-positive, you get something which is non-positive. So it is non-positive and non-negative, so it must be 0. It means that the solution is positive. So it is a property of the matrix. The matrix is monotone. So you preserve the positivity property. So now I want to get some discrete energy estimate. So the energy estimate has been obtained by multiplying the equation by U and integrating. So here you multiply by U transpose, and now both sides of the equation, you get this relation. U transpose times A times U has been already computed, so you have a discrete version of the L2 norm of the gradient of U to the square. And for the right-hand side, you have the sum of the measure of K, Fk times Uk. You can apply a Cauchy-Schwarz inequality to this side. And now, if you have some discrete Poincaré inequality, which give a relation between the L2 norm of the solution to the square and the discrete version of the L2 norm of the gradient of U to the square. So this could be a discrete Poincaré inequality. You will get, so you use it in this relation. So you have the same quantity at the left and at the right, but here to the square, and here with here without exponent, and here with the square root. So you can get an estimate on the solution. And this discrete energy estimate is a kind, it is a discrete H1 estimate on the solution. Okay? So it is not the exact H1 norm, but it is a discrete counterpart of the H1 norm. Okay, it means that we can define, so for the piecewise constant reconstruction, we can compute the L2 norm of the solution, and we may define a discrete H1 semi-norm. It is the sum of the tau sigma UL minus UK to the square the sum over the interior edges, and here, if you have some boundary edges, so just a part which belong to, for which you have a Dirichlet, homogeneous Dirichlet boundary condition, you have the tau sigma UK square. Okay, so I assumed up to now that we have this discrete Poincaré inequality, and if we have this discrete Poincaré inequality, I get the discrete H1 estimate for the approximate solution. Okay? So, how can we conclude to the convergence of the scheme now, when you have this two-step? So first, what does it mean? So, convergence, it means that we consider a sequence of meshes, so a sequence with the index n, so of Tn, En, and Pn. These meshes must be admissible, and we assume that the size Hn tends to 0 when n tends to infinity. Okay, so for each mesh, we consider the given approximate solution, and I will denote it now Un. Okay, so we have a sequence of approximate solutions. If you accept this discrete Poincaré inequality, I will show it in a next lecture. We have this discrete H1 estimate, which means that there exists a constant C, not depending on n, not depending on the mesh, such that Un is uniformly bounded. Okay, so now we hope that it means that we have convergence in L2, because okay, it could copy the fact that H1 is compactly embedded in L2. So at the discrete level now, we want that the fact that Un is bounded for the discrete H1 norm, it implies that this sequence of solution is convergent in L2. Okay, so that's what is written in this theorem, and I will just give two details after. So the theorem is the following. So you assume that you have a sequence of admissible meshes with a size with Hn tending to 0. You have this sequence of approximate solutions given by the finite volume scheme. Then this sequence converges to some u in L2, and the solution, this limit u in practice belongs to H1 naught of omega, and it is a unique solution to the Poisson equation. So it satisfies the variational formulation. Okay, so you can already imagine that there are several steps in these proofs. I already showed some of them, but you have this discrete estimate, so you want to extract a subsequence which is convergent in L2, then you have to be careful to the limit, and then you have to identify the fact that the limit is the solution to the Poisson equation. And as this solution is unique, in practice you will get the convergence of the whole sequence. Okay? So first of all, the compactness result. The compactness result is a consequence of the discrete H1 estimate. So we have to to adapt this discrete H1 estimate to get the convergence, and it is obtained thanks to Riesz-Frechet-Kolmogorov theorem I will show you just after. Then you get the strong convergence in L2 of a subsequence. You will denote U the limit and show that it belongs to H1 naught. And then you have to pass to the limit in the scheme. What does it mean? It means that you have to multiply the scheme by some test function, and in order to show that the limit is a weak solution. And then, thanks to the uniqueness of the solution, you have the convergence of the whole sequence. Okay, so for today, I will not focus on the discrete Poincaré inequality. I prefer to focus on the compactness result and show you this adaptation. So you can find that in the book by Aymar, Galouette, and Herbin. So here you have the compactness theorem by Kolmogorov. And we will see how to apply it to our sequence of discrete solution. So you consider omega, which is a bounded domain of Rn, and a set A, which is included in LQ of omega, Q greater than 1 and less than infinity. Then, what says the theorem? The theorem says that A is relatively compact in LQ if and only if there exists an extension P of U included in LQ of Rn, such that P of U must be equal to U almost everywhere in omega for all U in A. The set of P of U for U in A must be bounded in LQ of Rn, so you have to extend to Rn. That's why you have P of U here. And then, if you consider the translation in space of the function P of U for a given eta, so the difference between P of U taken at x plus eta minus P of U at x, and you take the LQ norm of Rn, it must tend to 0 when eta tends to 0 uniformly with respect to U in A. Okay, so with these 3 items, you get the fact that A is relatively compact in LQ. So we want to use that to apply that to our discrete solution. And in practice, what we have to show is that the discrete H1 estimate implies this relation, this property of the translation. And that's the idea by Aymar, Galouette, and Herbin. So you just define simply the extension of the discrete function ut by taking its value on omega and extend it by 0, so that the first property is satisfied. The second is also easily satisfied because the L2 norm of P of ut is equal to the L2 norm of ut. And then just writing what are these differences, because these are differences for the piecewise constant approximation. In practice, you can show that it is bounded, so you take the L2 norm to the square, and here you get the discrete H1 norm multiplied by eta times eta plus 2h. And as this is uniformly bounded, you get that it tends to 0 when eta tends to 0. So you will find that in the book by Aymar, Galouette, and Herbin. And I mention here a paper which permits to deal with the case where you have evolutive equation. Because when you have, for evolutive equation, you must have some results. So you must have another compactness result, and you have in this paper some extensions of Aubin-Simon or Aubin-Lyons lemma, so which can be applied to evolutive equation. Okay, maybe I went a bit fast, but I just want to make a conclusion. So you see that what I wanted to show with the analysis of the scheme for the Poisson equation is that we need some specific results for the space of approximate solution. So we need a specific Sobolev inequality in general for the set of piecewise constant function. We have to adapt some compactness results, but what is essential is to have proved some energy estimate, discrete energy estimate on the approximate solution. Okay, so what I will show you in the next lectures is how to use, for other kinds of equations, some dissipative property to get some good estimates on the approximate solution, which permits, after that, to pass to the limit in the scheme, and also to study the behavior of the scheme with respect to time or with respect to parameters. Okay, I think it's finished for today.
Any questions?
Yes.
Okay. My question: why do you need a strong compactness actually?
In practice, I need convergence.
Yeah, I mean, because for finite element, I would just use that H10 is an Hilbert space, so you can extract.
In practice, the proof for finite element is not the proof I showed you, because you make a difference between, you prefer a proof by computing the difference between the exact solution and the approximate solution. No, so what I showed you, it's not the usual proof for finite element schemes. In general, you compare.
No, but I mean, if you don't want to prove an error estimate, but just to prove that you converge to a solution of the equation, then being bounded in H10 is enough. No, it's a linear equation. You just extract a subsequence that converges weakly or something like that.
Okay. Okay. Yes, maybe it's. If I want to generalize the result, in practice, I prefer to introduce this notion of strong compactness, because you say, okay, here it's linear, but I want also to deal with nonlinear equation and to extend this kind of result. So, okay, for this simple example, maybe I could do an easier proof, but I just want to introduce some principles. So that's why I prefer to do that like that. And okay, I want to have. Okay, I think it's an information to get strong convergence in L2. It's also a nice information, because here you can also make some error for this scheme for the Poisson equation. You can also get some.
Error estimate.
Yes, some error estimates for the solution.
Yes.
Other questions? Maybe? Yes.
Yes. Okay, so when you see this slide, my question is, why use finite volume scheme? It seems so much harder. So maybe there is a motivation beyond Poisson equation, I guess, and if yes, which is it?
I think that finite volume scheme at the beginning were more devoted to transport equations, so hyperbolic equations, than for elliptic equation, because you see, well, people working on finite element schemes for Poisson or for general diffusion equation, they do not want this hypothesis of admissibility on the mesh. It is a very strong hypothesis. However, I don't think it is. Maybe the convergence proof can be not so easy than for finite element method, but for the implementation of the scheme, it's very easy. You can have, and you have very robust schemes, what I will show for the next lecture. So if you have some long-time behavior, what I will show for Fokker-Planck equations or things like that, you are able to prove that finite volume scheme will have the same kind of behavior, and it's not so easy with high-order schemes, very high-order finite element schemes, for instance. It's not possible to prove that. So here I want to focus on the structural properties. Okay, positivity, long-time behavior, dissipativity, and I think that with these schemes, which are low-order scheme, but which are robust, but they are robust with respect to a lot of properties. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello. My question will be simpler since I'm not a mathematician. I'm absolutely not familiar with the H1 notation.
You know what is H1?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So H1 is a set of L2 functions whose derivative in the sense of distribution is also an L2 function.
Okay.
Okay? And H1 naught is a subset of H1 for a function who vanishes at the boundary.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Okay.
Any other question to finish Marius' sports session? No. No one? Okay, so we can thank again Claire for